Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a Texas pitmaster moves into his dream home, he ignites more than just his smoker. He sparks a war with a tyrannical HOA president. What starts as a simple barbecue turns into a battle of freedom, fire, and ribs. This is the story of smoke, sabotage, and sweet smoked revenge. I still remember the smell of mesquite smoke curling into the sky that evening, dancing above my backyard like it belonged there. Hell, it did belong there. I'd only been in my new house for about 3 weeks, and already the grill had kissed more briskets than most suburbanites would see in a lifetime. This wasn't just a home, it was my little corner of Texas freedom. And I was going to live in it exactly the way I wanted. The place was perfect. I'd bought the property just outside a gated community called Madison Park. Before I signed a damn thing, my real estate attorney combed through the plat maps and zoning documents with the focus of a federal prosecutor. My lot was adjacent to the HOA, right across the street from it, in fact, but not subject to it. That was key. I wasn't about to let some overcooked board of control freaks tell me what color mulch I could use or whether my grass was a 1/4 inch too ambitious. I moved in early spring, when the air was just warm enough to say, let's celebrate. So I invited a dozen of my closest friends, colleagues from the restaurant, a couple of local pitmasters, and one guy who just always brings excellent bourbon. We kicked off that Saturday around 4 in the afternoon. By 6, my 3 custom-built smokers were whispering sweet hickory nothings into the neighborhood air. By 8, the ribs were falling off the bone and into grateful hands. The music wasn't loud. Classic blues, just enough to sway your shoulders without pissing off the sky. But apparently, it still stirred the wrong demons. The next morning, I shuffled out to the mailbox in my slippers and a t-shirt with a cartoon brisket flexing its biceps. I had coffee in one hand and the smug satisfaction of a well-smoked Saturday in the other. Inside the box was a crisp white envelope with a gold-embossed logo, Madison Park Homeowners Association. That was weird. I hadn't signed up for any newsletter. I opened it right there on the porch. Dear Mr. Jackson, it read in delightfully passive-aggressive Times New Roman, you are in violation of HOA rule, prohibition of open-flame cooking devices. A $150 fine has been assessed to your property. Please remit payment within 10 business days to avoid escalation. I stood there, blinking at the letter like it had personally insulted my mother. A fine for barbecuing on my land. The rest of the letter was a snarl of bureaucratic nonsense, citing things like ambient smoke contamination and community integrity. I read it twice just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating from mesquite fumes. Then I laughed. Not a chuckle, not a smirk. A full, deep belly laugh. I wasn't part of their HOA. I didn't owe them a damn thing. And I knew it. Still, I figured someone from their side might come knocking, so I prepped my documents, plat map, legal parcel boundary, and a very polite letter from the county clerk confirming I was not, nor had ever been, under the jurisdiction of the Madison Park HOA. Sure enough, it didn't take long. That Wednesday, just after sunset, a woman in her late 50s marched across the street like she was storming the beaches of Normandy. She wore beige everything, pants, shoes, blouse, and her expression screamed, I correct waiters. Her name, as she so graciously informed me without a hint of irony, was Mrs. Janet Kruger, president of the Madison Park Homeowners Association for 9 years, and running, as she put it. I silently added from joy to the end of that sentence. She stood at the edge of my driveway like I was expected to roll out a red carpet. Mr. Jackson, she called out, nostrils already flaring. We need to talk about your smoke. I glanced behind me toward the now quiet smokers, their bellies empty but proud. My smoke, I said. She nodded with the severity of a woman whose soul had been personally wronged by barbecue. The odor carries. It seeps into homes. Our residents have complained. It's a nuisance and a health hazard. I stepped forward, calm as could be. Mrs. Kruger, I'm not part of Madison Park. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, I think you'll find that you are within the influence of our standards. I'm within smelling distance. That's not the same as jurisdiction. She frowned. I'm sure the courts would disagree. I smiled. Well, that's why God made attorneys, isn't it? That didn't land well. She tightened her mouth so hard it disappeared into her face. You may think you're clever, Mr. Jackson, she said, but this community has expectations, standards. And we will not tolerate disruptive behavior. I folded my arms. Ma'am, I'm just making dinner. You'll regret this, she said, turning on her orthopedic heel. One way or another. And with that, she disappeared into the fading daylight, leaving behind the subtle scent of war and sandalwood lotion. I stood there a moment longer, watching her retreat, then glanced over at my silent smokers. I could have sworn they looked offended. I poured myself another cup of coffee, sat back on my porch, and chuckled to myself. This was gonna be fun. They say smoke rises, but out here in the suburbs, it also draws attention. Not the good kind. Not the kind that says, damn, who's cooking? More like, who gave this outsider permission to enjoy himself? Over the next few weeks, it became clear that Janet Kruger wasn't just mildly annoyed. No. This woman was waging a one-woman campaign against me and every molecule of hickory I dared send skyward. My second barbecue night, a casual gathering of maybe 15 friends, set her off like someone had burned her homeowner's manual. That time, she didn't come over. Instead, 3 days later, I got a visit from the local fire department. 2 trucks, lights off but official as hell, rolled up to my driveway while I was smoking a batch of pulled pork for a friend's birthday. Sir, we received a report of open flame and possible fire code violations, one of them said, stepping onto my lawn with clipboard in hand. I gave them the grand tour, showed the triple insulated smokers, the clear zones, the extinguishers, the permits. The captain, a guy named Reyes, took one deep sniff, sighed, and muttered, "Smells like my uncle's place. Damn good stuff." They left within 10 minutes. No violations, no fines, just a warning that someone had been very persistent in calling about me. 3 days later, the health department showed up. Again, no issues. They inspected my backyard setup like I was running an outdoor restaurant. One inspector actually asked if I catered private events. I told him I was just feeding friends and family on private property. Everything was clean, licensed, and more legal than half the HOA's landscaping budget. Then came the cops. Noise complaint allegedly. This time it was a Wednesday night, not even a party. Just me, my dog, and a vinyl record playing in the background while I tested a new rub on a rack of ribs. The officer who showed up looked half apologetic before I even opened the door. "Sir," he said, "we received a complaint about excessive noise and rowdy behavior." I stared at him, then looked around at the serene moonlit backyard. You could hear crickets, literally. The most action happening was my smoker puffing gently like it was meditating. "You want to come in for ribs?" I asked. He chuckled. "I'm on duty, but if I wasn't..." He left with a shrug and 0 citations. I was starting to see a pattern here. Janet was trying to grind me down. Death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. The trouble was, every department she sicked on me came back empty-handed. My setup was tight, legal, documented, and that drove her absolutely insane. Then came the flyers. One morning, as I was walking out to grab the newspaper, I still read one, I found a stack of glossy printouts tucked under my windshield wipers. Neighbors told me similar sheets had been left in their mailboxes and doors overnight. They looked official at first glance, with a logo that read Central Texas Clean Air Coalition and a picture of a coughing child under the headline, "Your neighbor's smoke is harming your family." The body of the flyer claimed that barbecue smoke contains carcinogens, allergens, and microtoxins, and encouraged residents to report unlawful smoke activity. It even included a fake quote from some non-existent pediatrician. It was a full-on propaganda war, and I knew exactly who was behind it. I compared the font and phrasing to the original HOA letter I'd received. Same style, same phrasing. Hell, the damn flyer even had a typo in the same spot the original fine letter did. Residential instead of residential. Janet's grammar was as rigid and misguided as her sense of control, but it wasn't just paper and whispers. She started rallying the actual neighborhood against me. At one point, she hosted a community meeting at the clubhouse across the street. I didn't go. I wasn't invited naturally, but word got back to me. A local dad, Ron, who lived 2 doors down and always nodded at me when he walked his golden retriever, showed up at my door one evening with a 6-pack and a sympathetic look. "They're painting you like some kind of backyard menace," he said. "Janet even said you were operating a commercial kitchen out of your house." I snorted into my beer. "Wish I was. I'd make a killing." "She's trying to push a petition through the HOA," Ron added. "Says it's to limit nuisance cooking and enforce environmental standards. total bull. I thanked him. He paused, then said something I'll never forget. You know, he said, eyes drifting toward Janet's house across the street. She's been like this for years. But you? You're the first one that won't fold. I nodded, suddenly more determined than ever. Janet wanted a war. Okay. But I wasn't going to fight it her way. I'd already seen how she operated. Back channels, fear-mongering, empty threats dressed up in official stationery. But I had something better. I had time. I had patience. And I had the truth. Oh, and a hell of a lot of brisket. Let her keep sending the smoke signals. I was just getting warmed up. I should have known she wouldn't stop at flyers and fake complaints. That would have been too easy. Too sane. About 3.5 months after I moved in, just as the heat of summer was settling in like a wet towel over the city, I got another envelope. This one wasn't tucked under my windshield or shoved passive-aggressively into my mailbox. No, this one was hand-delivered by a guy in a cheap navy blazer who looked like he moonlighted as a mall Santa during off-season divorces. Delivery for Mr. Jackson, he said, offering the envelope like it was a court summons. Spoiler, it practically was. I opened it right there on my porch, in my barbecue-stained apron, with a pork rib in one hand and a growing sense of déjà vu in the other. It was titled, Emergency Ordinance, Open Flame and Smoke Emissions in Residential Adjacency Zones. The document looked official, seals, signatures, a fancy header from what claimed to be the Travis County Residential Health and Safety Board. I'd never even heard of it. The letter stated that a new emergency ordinance had been passed banning all forms of outdoor flame cooking within 500 feet of any HOA-regulated community in response to recent air quality incidents and fire risks. It even mentioned me, by address, though carefully not by name, saying the new measure was enacted in light of recent violations. According to the document, I had 30 days to remove any and all permanent outdoor cooking installations and smoke-generating devices, or face legal action, including possible civil and criminal penalties. Now, I know the stink of bullshit when I smell it, and this thing reeked. First of all, emergency ordinances don't come out of nowhere with no vote, no public notice, and no media coverage. Second, the county doesn't hand enforcement power to HOAs. And third, come on, Travis County Residential Health and Safety Board. That sounded like something Janet cooked up while polishing her collection of neighborhood watch badges. I scanned the document 3 more times, looking for any trace of legal authenticity. It was detailed, I'll give her that. The formatting was pro. The language was formal, but something about it felt too polished, like someone had Googled how to write a legal threat and copy-pasted a Frankenstein together. So I did what I always do when something smells fishier than a spoiled catfish fry. I called Marcus. Marcus is my lawyer and my friend and my drinking buddy, and the only man I know who once argued a zoning appeal while wearing cowboy boots with flames stitched up the sides. I emailed him a scanned copy of the letter. 15 minutes later, he called me back, laughing so hard he was choking on whatever he was drinking. "This is the dumbest forgery I've seen in 10 years, he said between gasps. "So, not real?" I asked, chewing the last bite of my rib. "Not even close. That board doesn't exist. The county seal is outdated by 5 years. The signature belongs to a guy who moved to Oregon. And the ordinance number listed, it's for a leash law about aggressive poodles." Damn. She even faked the ordinance number? She did, he said, and she's going to regret that. He told me to sit tight. We'd document everything and hold off on any public response, for now. He wanted to see how far she was willing to go. I agreed, reluctantly. My gut told me this wasn't just about some sour old woman who hated smoke. Janet was playing a longer game, and I needed to understand her end goal. In the meantime, I started documenting everything. Every envelope, every flyer, every anonymous complaint. I bought new security cameras, including one aimed at her front yard, not to spy, but to have a clean record of anyone entering my property. I got better locks, replaced the motion lights. My house wasn't just a home anymore, it was a front line. And wouldn't you know it, the day after I got that bogus ordinance letter, someone tried to open the latch on my back gate around midnight. Camera caught them. Blurry, but male, tall, wearing a hoodie, moving fast. I reported it to the police, just to establish a paper trail. The officer was polite, professional, and slightly amused when I explained the whole saga. You're telling me the HOA president forged a county document to shut down your grill? That's exactly what I'm telling you. You ever think about just moving? I stared at him like he'd asked if I ever considered becoming a vegan. No, I said. No, I have not. After that, I stopped thinking of Janet Kruger as a nuisance. This wasn't just a battle over barbecue. This was a turf war. She saw my house, my friends, my grill, my freedom, and it lit her up like a dry Christmas tree with bad wiring. And now, she'd stepped over a line. A big one. Marcus called back 2 days later with a plan. We don't confront her yet, he said. Let her dig deeper. Let her think she's winning, because when this all comes crashing down, it's gonna be in public. And I want cameras rolling. I didn't say much, just stared out at my grill. The coals were still warm. I fed a few more in, watched the smoke rise again into the air. Let her see it. I always knew Janet was the kind of person who preferred wars fought from behind a picket fence. Nasty letters, backdoor complaints, HOA bureaucracy turned into a weapon. But after the fake ordinance stunt fell flat, something changed. She went from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. It started small, the kind of things you might brush off as bad luck if you weren't already neck-deep in HOA hell. One morning, I walked out to head to the restaurant and noticed my front tire looked low. Real low. Closer inspection revealed not one but 2 nails embedded near the sidewall, too close to patch, just enough to ruin a perfectly good set of Michelin rubber, not just a coincidence. A week later, it happened again. Different tire, same kind of nails, same quiet stretch of my driveway. My cameras didn't catch it. At the time, I hadn't aimed them down toward the asphalt. That changed real fast. Then came the smoker sabotage. I'd fired up the pit one morning, prepping for a charity event downtown. I opened the largest smoker and found standing water inside. Not rain, not condensation. A full gallon at least pooled along the bottom of the firebox and snuffing out every bit of coal from the last session. It hadn't rained in over a week. I checked the locks on the side gate. Untouched. No signs of forced entry. But someone had gotten in. Maybe climbed the fence. Maybe they knew I left the side shed key under a flower pot. Not anymore. That's when I got serious. I installed new night vision cameras, higher resolution, wider range, overlapping coverage. I upgraded my locks. Put up motion-triggered floodlights bright enough to give a squirrel an existential crisis. I even got a backup battery array, so nothing would shut off if the power mysteriously went out. The next move came online. My restaurant's Yelp page, which usually hovered in the 5-star range with glowing reviews about my brisket, suddenly dropped overnight. A dozen 1-star reviews popped up like weeds, all in the same day, all saying the same weird things. Cockroaches in the sauce. Saw the chef spit into the pit. Food poisoning after one bite. It was almost comical in its coordination. One of the accounts used a photo of my restaurant from 3 years ago before we remodeled. Another reviewer had the same username as a known HOA board member's daughter. I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I flagged every single one and forwarded the whole mess to Marcus. He was building a case, and this was golden. But the worst part came late one Tuesday night. I was asleep, dead tired from a long shift at the restaurant, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. Backyard. I sat up, groggy, reached for the screen, and tapped into the live feed. There he was. A man, tall, in a dark hoodie and work gloves, hunched near my largest smoker. He moved with hesitation, like he'd done this before, but knew it was risky now. I watched him unscrew the latch on the firebox, reach inside, and dump what looked like a bottle of liquid. He bolted seconds later, slipping over the side fence like a damn raccoon in a retirement vest. I froze the footage, zoomed in. It wasn't perfect resolution, but the angle from the west-facing camera caught just enough. The man had turned slightly when he stepped back from the smoker. That face, that profile, I recognized him. It was Harold Kruger. You know the dead husband Janet always mentioned in that sorrowful tone. When Harold passed, since Harold's gone, Harold would have hated all this noise. Bullshit. Harold wasn't dead. He was just hiding behind the HOA curtain like a stagehand rigging the lights. I saved the footage to 3 different cloud backups, emailed one to Marcus, put a copy on a flash drive, and locked it in my gun safe. Now, I wasn't the kind of guy to go straight to the cops every time a neighbor sneezed on my side of the sidewalk. But this was criminal, trespassing, property damage, intentional sabotage of commercial equipment. And Janet, she was behind it. No way Harold was acting alone. Marcus called me the next morning after reviewing the footage. "You want to press charges?" he asked. "Eventually," I said, "but not yet." He was quiet for a moment. "You're planning something." "Oh yeah," I said. "I want this to end in front of an audience." He chuckled. "In that case, I've got an idea." He told me about a local ordinance that allowed for large-scale community gatherings with proper permits, music, food, open flames, everything, so long as you filed at least 3 weeks in advance, notified adjacent residents, and followed basic noise curfews. "We're going to throw a party," Marcus said. "The biggest goddamn barbecue festival this neighborhood's ever seen. Press, politicians, bloggers, make it a spectacle." "And let her try to shut it down," I added, grinning. "We'll make it airtight," he said, "legal across the board, and we'll call it something poetic, like Freedom Fest." "Better," I said, "Barbecue Freedom Festival." We started planning that day. If you ever want to see a control freak lose their damn mind, plan a party right under their nose and make it legal. The next few weeks were a masterclass in bureaucratic judo. With Marcus guiding me, we filed every permit imaginable: assembly, temporary food service, amplified music, waste disposal, fire safety compliance, and even porta-potty placement. Yes, I had to declare how many toilets would be on site. Civilized chaos, baby. The best part? We did everything by the book. No loopholes, no gray areas. I wanted this thing to be bulletproof, and I wanted Janet to watch every single brick of it get laid. We called it the Barbecue Freedom Festival and made sure the name appeared on every flyer, poster, and digital invite. Marcus even built a website with a countdown clock and a bright red slogan: smoke, ribs, liberty. I invited everyone I knew: local foodies, journalists, city council reps, former co-workers, current restaurant staff, regulars, neighbors who were sick of Janet's HOA crap. Marcus pulled some strings and got one of our state representatives, an absolute brisket fanatic, to commit to a quick stop for a rib or two. One blogger with over 50,000 followers RSVP'd in all caps. Hell yes. We scheduled it for a Saturday, 3 weeks out, noon to 6. All legal, all public, all delicious. And I made damn sure the address was printed loud and clear: 116 Wilcox Drive. My property. Not HOA land, not subject to their rules. The flyer went viral faster than Janet could sharpen a pair of garden shears. I posted it on the community board at the supermarket, tacked one onto the bulletin board at the city library, bought a small billboard on the highway, cheap weekday rate, posted clips of ribs sizzling over hickory wood with sound bites from past guests saying things like, "This man should run for mayor," and also "Feed me forever." I even printed 50 Freedom Rib t-shirts and gave them to the restaurant staff. Janet saw it all. I know because 2 days after the flyers dropped, she showed up in my driveway at 7:30 in the morning, clutching a red binder and looking like she'd just come from a funeral for decency itself. She didn't knock. She didn't smile. She didn't even say hello. "This is an escalation," she said flatly, holding up a printed flyer like it was a biohazard. I sipped my coffee and leaned on the porch railing. "Morning, Janet. You want a biscuit?" "Got some left from breakfast." She ignored the offer. "You're hosting a mass gathering on the border of a quiet residential neighborhood." "Correct. And I've got the permits to prove it." "Would you like to see them?" "I know about your permits," she snapped. "But this is still a public nuisance." "Actually," I said, "it's a public celebration." Her eye twitched. "People will be parking all over," she said. "Blocking driveways. There will be music, litter, smoke. Don't even get me started on the smoke." "You forgot joy," I said. "There will be joy too." "I will file for an injunction." "You do that," I said. "Good luck." She turned sharply and marched back across the street. I swear if she'd had a cape, it would have flared behind her like a villain in a B-movie. Sure enough, 4 days later, I was served papers again, this time with a real court stamp. She'd filed an emergency motion with the district court to block the festival on grounds of public safety, environmental hazard, and community disruption. Marcus almost fell out of his chair laughing when he read it. She even cited a wildfire risk, he said, in a manicured suburban lawn. He filed a rebuttal immediately, attaching all the permits, safety plans, site maps, and noise ordinance compliance paperwork. He even included a character reference from Councilman Ortega, who was not only attending the festival, but had requested a second helping of ribs in advance. We went to court on a Tuesday morning. Janet showed up in a beige pantsuit like she was running for sheriff of absolutely no fun. Her lawyer, a thin, sweaty guy who looked like he'd been paid in expired HOA dues, tried to argue that my event posed an existential threat to the fabric of neighborhood tranquility. The judge, a tired woman in her 50s with zero tolerance for melodrama, stared at him for a long beat before asking, "Are there fire permits?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said, sliding them over. "Noise ordinance compliance?" "Yes, ma'am. Music ends at 6 p.m. "Alcohol?" "No sales. All beverages provided free by the host." "Any indication of criminal intent, code violation, or health hazard?" "None. In fact, a city health inspector signed off on the food prep zone just yesterday." She sighed, looked at Janet. "Ma'am, this is a barbecue, not a riot." The motion was denied. I didn't smile, not in front of the judge, but I smiled hard as hell walking back to the truck. That night, we celebrated with a private brisket tasting. Marcus called it a test run. I called it victory meat. Janet, she'd just watched her final play burn to ash. And the real fire hadn't even started yet. The morning of the Barbecue Freedom Festival felt like Christmas, and a trial by combat rolled into one. I was up before sunrise, checking every last detail: smokers hot and clean, music stage set, lawn chairs arranged like an army of chilled-out Texans ready for battle. My team, friends, staff from the restaurant, and 2 guys from Marcus's firm who just wanted free ribs, buzzed around with excitement. At 10:30 sharp, the first wave of guests started rolling in. Families, retirees, local bloggers with tripods and gimbals. One guy showed up in a full American flag suit and introduced himself as the Rib Patriot. By noon, my backyard was full. Grills smoking, music playing, people laughing like they hadn't seen joy in weeks. We had it all: pulled pork sliders, brisket tacos, smoked turkey legs that required a 2-hand grip. We even had a vegan table, mostly to shut down complaints, but to my surprise, it got wiped out in 30 minutes. At 1 p.m., Councilman Ortega showed up with his staff, shook my hand, and gave a 5-minute speech about freedom, flavor, and the pursuit of perfectly smoked meat. The crowd roared. Someone handed him a plate of ribs mid-sentence. He finished his remarks while chewing. Instant legend. By 2:30, the head count had broken 100. My backyard looked like a friendly, well-fed rebellion. Drones buzzed overhead, local media getting aerial shots. A band played old-school country covers from the corner of the yard, and I saw at least 3 people dancing barefoot on the grass. Janet had been watching. I could feel her across the street. She'd been pacing in her window for hours. I saw binoculars. At one point, I caught her yelling at a UPS driver for double parking too close to her driveway. But at 4:05 p.m., something snapped. She came marching across the street with 5 HOA board members flanking her like a very beige militia, matching polos, clipboards, plastic name tags, the whole look. And the moment she set foot on my lawn, the music paused. Not from fear, just from timing. The band had wrapped a song and hadn't started the next. Pure luck. Her voice sliced through the air like someone strangling a goose. "This is a violation. This is illegal assembly. You're poisoning the air. This is a safety hazard and a public nuisance." People turned. Some started recording. The bloggers had their phones out before she hit the second sentence. One woman live streaming whispered, "Oh damn, this is the HOA president, right? Let's go." I walked up calmly, holding a platter of ribs. "Mrs. Kruger, this is a private event on private property with full permits. You're currently trespassing. Please leave." "You don't scare me, Mr. Jackson," she hissed. "You think you're clever with your permits and your showboating, but this is my neighborhood." I gestured to the crowd. Seems like they disagree. She turned and saw over 100 people staring back, phones raised, some amused, some angry, one guy holding a sign that said, "Smoke 'em if you got 'em." Then she did the one thing that guaranteed viral fame. She grabbed a tray of ribs off the serving table and flung it onto the grass. Sauce everywhere, meat rolling like wounded soldiers. A collective gasp rippled through the yard. Then one of her HOA buddies, a wiry guy in golf shorts, stepped forward and knocked over a full table of drinks. Another yanked a speaker cord, cutting off the next track mid-beat. 2 of my friends stepped in, including Marcus, who wasn't just a lawyer today, he was head of security. They moved fast, calm and assertive. No yelling, no touching, just blocking her path and ushering the HOA wrecking crew off the lawn. Janet shrieked, "Get your hands off me. This is assault. I'm calling the police." "You're being filmed," someone said, by like 20 people. She froze for half a second. then pointed at me and screamed, "He's been terrorizing this community. This is harassment. Arrest him." The silence that followed was almost funny. I walked up, showed her my laminated permit folder like it was holy scripture, and said, "This is your last chance. Leave my property or I'll have the police remove you." And right on cue, flashing red and blue lights rolled up. Someone must have called ahead. The officer stepped out, same guy who came months ago for the noise complaint. He took one look at the scene. Ruined ribs, knocked over drinks, a crowd filming, and Janet standing in the middle like a toddler who just bit someone at daycare. I handed him the security footage on my phone. He watched it quietly for 20 seconds, then turned to her. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and disturbing the peace." "You have no idea who I am," she screamed as he cuffed her. He didn't even blink. "Actually, I do. That's why we brought 2 cars." They also cuffed Harold, who tried to step between Janet and the officer and ended up shoving one of the cops. That earned him a second charge. 2 more HOA board members followed, one for resisting, one for destruction of property. The crowd erupted. Cheers, whistles. One guy held up his rib like a toast to justice. And me. I just stood there, arms crossed, trying not to grin like a maniac. The music resumed, the smoke kept rolling, and the festival carried on like nothing could stop it. Because nothing could. After the cops hauled Janet and her HOA wrecking crew off my lawn, you'd think things might quiet down. But no. That festival was only the opening act. What came next was the real reckoning. Within 24 hours, the footage had already hit the local news. By day 3, it was viral. Headline after headline, HOA president arrested at barbecue festival. Karen tries to cancel ribs, gets canceled by cuffs. One blogger called it the brisket rebellion of Madison Park. My inbox exploded. People from all over the state were sending messages of support. Some offered to donate to my legal fund. Didn't need it, but appreciated the love. One guy from Houston sent a handwritten note with a $50 bill and said, "This is for the ribs she ruined. Justice for meat." Meanwhile, the city launched a formal investigation into Janet's conduct. Turns out her arrest was just the tip of a smoked iceberg. Remember that fake ordinance she served me weeks earlier? Marcus handed the judge a detailed breakdown of the forgery, falsified agency, stolen seal, bogus ordinance number. That alone could have landed her in jail. But it got better. Harold confessed. Under pressure from the DA and facing multiple charges himself, trespassing, property damage, impersonating a health inspector, yep, that was him. He rolled on his own wife. Well, estranged wife. Apparently, he'd been living in some condo downtown for years, but showed up whenever Janet needed quiet work done. He admitted to dumping water into my smoker, to scattering nails on my driveway, to creating fake Yelp accounts and spamming my restaurant's page with 1-star reviews. All of it orchestrated by Janet. She even reimbursed him through HOA petty cash, labeled as landscaping services. Marcus nearly spit out his coffee when he read the audit trail. The trial wasn't just about the barbecue incident anymore. It was about abuse of power, misuse of HOA funds, harassment, and criminal conspiracy. In court, Janet tried to spin it, claimed she was protecting the neighborhood from an aggressive commercial intrusion. Her lawyer argued that I'd weaponized food culture to inflame tensions. The judge wasn't buying it. Neither was the jury. Especially not after watching video after video of her screaming, throwing ribs, and accusing a man in a cowboy hat of being a foot soldier of chaos. I sat through the whole trial stone-faced, wearing my cleanest boots and a suit I hadn't dusted off since my cousin's wedding. When I took the stand, I spoke plainly. I just wanted to cook on my land, be left alone, and share food with people I cared about. And maybe, teach a bully that you don't mess with Texas barbecue. The verdict came fast. Janet Kruger, guilty of trespassing, guilty of vandalism, guilty of filing fraudulent legal documents, guilty of criminal misuse of HOA funds, sentenced to 1 year of probation, ordered to pay $5,000 in fines, ordered to pay $3,500 in restitution for damages, banned from holding any HOA position for 5 years. Harold, 6 months probation, $8,000 fine, 200 hours of community service. The other board members caught. Lesser charges. 2 got fines. 1 had to resign from the HOA permanently. And the HOA itself? It held an emergency vote and unanimously removed Janet as president. They even opened a forensic audit into every dollar spent under her 9-year reign. Spoiler, it didn't look good. But my favorite part, the counter lawsuit. Marcus filed a civil suit on my behalf for harassment, attempted sabotage of business reputation, emotional distress, and loss of income. We didn't just want to clear my name, we wanted damages. We won. The court awarded me $50,000 in damages, enough to upgrade the smokers, redo the driveway, and donate a chunk to a local food bank. Janet tried to appeal. She lost again. That judgment stung. But the real punishment was the attention. That footage of her screaming, grabbing ribs, getting cuffed. It never went away. It became a meme. I even saw someone at the farmer's market wearing a shirt with her face and the words, "You can't silence the smoke." I didn't sell those shirts. Someone else did. America, baby. The HOA tried to clean up its act after that. New leadership, new policies, open meetings, transparency. It was almost human. A few neighbors even apologized. Not all, but enough. And me? I got my piece. Kind of. The phone rang more than ever. People wanted interviews, podcasts, catering gigs. One guy from Netflix emailed asking if I'd ever consider doing a docuseries called Grill Power. I told him I'd think about it. After all, my hands were full, with brisket, justice, and a very satisfying sense of revenge, smoked low and slow. It's funny how quickly legends form when meat is involved. It's been 6 months since the BBQ Freedom Festival, and I still can't walk into a grocery store without someone asking, "Hey, you're the guy from the rib riot, right?" They always smile. Some want selfies. One guy even asked me to sign a pack of charcoal. I obliged. Fame's weird, but when it comes laced with hickory smoke, I can live with it. My restaurant, never been busier. We've got a waiting list 2 weeks long, a line out the door most Saturdays, and reservations from folks driving in from 2-3 towns over. A barbecue road trip, they call it. People want to taste what was worth going to war for. We've got new shirts now. You can't evict the smoke, in bold letters, with a silhouette of me holding a rack of ribs like Excalibur. My cook Joey thought of it. We've sold over 500. And the festival. It's officially an annual event. The mayor's office even reached out, asking if we'd consider making it part of the city's summer calendar. We did. Next year's Barbecue Freedom Festival already has over 300 RSVPs. We've got food trucks, sponsors, and live music booked. Ortega's bringing a whole city council entourage this time, and he swore he's fasting the day before to make room for liberty. But the most unexpected change happened right here on Wilcox Drive. See, after Janet and Harold moved out quietly in the middle of the night, like smoke escaping a failed grill, the neighborhood felt lighter. Literally. The blinds weren't snapping shut every time I walked by. No more random inspections. No more petty warnings about non-compliant flower beds. About a month after the trial, a new HOA election was held. A young woman named Leah Sanchez won by a landslide. Early 30s graphic designer lives 2 streets down with her wife and a ridiculously chill bulldog named Meatball. One evening, not long after she took office, she walked up my driveway holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a BBQ spatula in the other. "I come in peace," she said. I laughed. "You're either the boldest HOA president in history or extremely lost," she smiled. "I think the last one gave us all a bad name. I just want to start over. If you ever feel like sitting down with the board, I'd love your input on how we can make this community less tyrannical." I invited her in. We drank wine, ate leftover ribs, and talked. Not just about bylaws and fences, but about what it means to live near people, not above them. It was the first genuine conversation I'd had with someone from the HOA in 2 years. Before she left, she pointed to the flyer I'd framed on the wall. Barbecue Freedom Festival, smoke, ribs, liberty. "Any chance you've got 2 tickets for next year?" "Tickets?" I grinned. "Leah, in this house, the ribs are always free. Just bring your appetite. And maybe don't try to have me arrested." She laughed. "Deal." I watched her walk off into the dusk, the bulldog waddling behind her, and for the first time in a long while, I realized something had changed. Not just the leadership, not just the rules. The neighborhood had grown a spine, or maybe it just remembered it had one. People talk now. Neighbors say hello. Some even wave when I fire up the pit instead of slamming their windows shut. It's not perfect. There's still the occasional complaint about parking or music, but now it comes with a knock, not a threat. Maybe it took a scandal. Maybe it took ribs flying through the air and a Karen in cuffs to reset things. Whatever the reason, things are better now. And if anyone ever tries to ban barbecue again, well, let's just say my firewood's stocked, my smokers are clean, and the people of Wilcox Drive know damn well you can't silence the smoke.